Today is Saturday, March 14th, 1964. Jurors are deliberating the fate of Jack Ruby. We'll get the reactions from those involved, some stoic, and others, well, not so much. I'm Eric Bushman.
And I'm Brandon Birmingham. This is the state of Texas versus Jack Ruby, the original trial of the century.
The jury made the decision early this morning that they would retire for the evening and get a few hours of sleep before deciding the fate of Jack Ruby. The question they faced was, did Ruby knowingly and in the right mind intend on killing Lee Harvey Oswald when he jumped out and shot him? Or was he temporarily insane by reason of psychomotor epilepsy when he shot the revolver with his middle finger, sending the bullet into Oswald's stomach? Jurors began deliberating on the morning of March 14th. While obviously exhausted from the marathon of closing arguments the night before and the early morning of, the group of 8 men and 4 women wanted to be done with the trial. Deliberations drag on into mid-morning and late morning, when at 4 minutes past 11:30, 3 knocks by Foreman Max Causey signaled they had reached a decision.
Both lead attorneys reacted in slightly different ways. Lead defense counsel Melvin Belli was confident, not that he was going to win, but that the jury would convict and issue a severe penalty. Belli is already telling reporters that they would appeal. And remember last night, District Attorney Wade said he was not satisfied with his closing argument, a rarity from a lawyer, and while he isn't speaking much, he's pacing up and down the jury box smoking a cigarette. Of course, nothing can happen without the judge being present. And where was Judge Brown during all this? At home sleeping, of course. Brown, now awake, must make his way from his house to the criminal courts building downtown. Meanwhile, one of the assistant DAs, Bill Alexander, who was the first to argue last night, is telling people he thinks it will be the death penalty. 10 minutes after noon, and Dallas County Sheriff Bill Decker offers a slight ease to those present. "It won't be long now," Sheriff Decker said. "The judge is here." 9 minutes after that, Judge Joe Brown finally enters the courtroom.
About to receive the verdict in the case styled the state of Texas versus Jack Ruby. I want no sort of demonstration, no sound, no gesturing of any kind. Sheriff, would you bring the jury in, please? When I finish, everybody will remain seated until I officially discharge the jury and release the court. This goes to you two. And gentlemen, you have reached a verdict in this case. May I have it, Sheriff, please? We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder with malice as charged in the indictment and assess his punishment at death. Signed, Max E. Causey, Foreman. So say you all, ladies and gentlemen. Is that your unanimous verdict? Will all of you whose verdict that is, please hold up your right hands. All right, Sheriff, he's your prisoner.
May I thank this jury for a victory
Keep your seats, please. There'll be no moving out. Don't let anybody out of the courtroom.
After one of the prosecutors thanks the jury, defense counsel Melvin Belli launches into a tirade. That tirade continued outside of the courthouse alongside co-counsel Joe Tonahill.
It's a kangaroo railroad, and every one of you know it, too.
What's your...
I hope the people of Dallas are proud of this jury that was shoved down our throat. One juror, before he sat on that jury, told his employee that if he got on the Ruby jury, he'd vote the death penalty. Another juror waved at the policeman when they were on the witness stand. Her nephew does the public relations work for the police department.
How do you feel about Judge Brown? How do you think he handled the case? Mr. Belli, your opinion on Judge Brown?
He went down the line for every motion that the district attorney made, and they led him into some 30 errors. And every Texas jurist knows this thing was the greatest railroading kangaroo court disgrace in the history of American law.
Did you say they disregarded your entire psychiatric case?
They disregard every bit of our psychiatric testimony. They disregarded every witness who was sworn. And you heard last night when those jurors looked at us and said, we don't want to have any argument. We've had our mind made up. Now, that was the nod when the judge said, do you want to go ahead? They didn't even want recess. Why, in a civilized country in the heart of darkest Africa, you wouldn't argue a man's life starting at 12 o'clock in the morning. When I think we're coming into Holy Week and Good Friday to have a sacrifice like this, I think we're back 2,000 years. And the blight that's on Dallas with those 12 people who announced a death penalty in this case, they'll make this a city of shame forevermore. And I'm going to participate in it, too, when I write this appeal.
Mr. Belli, Mr. Tannehill, your associate is a Texan. What's your reaction to it?
It's a violent miscarriage of justice.
Anything else to add to that, Mr. Tannehill?
I'm about to throw up.
While the two defense lawyers lost their case in defending Jack Ruby, a winning district attorney, Henry Wade, offers a much different tone, victorious yet restrained.
From the start, when this happened, I thought it was a case where he should have the death penalty. I've said that all along, told the jury that. We asked
Henry Wade, the district attorney.
And we asked for it. I think the facts fully warranted. I think it was an assassination in itself of a man handcuffed in police custody, and I think it went actually deeper than that, than who the person was killed. I think it was more of a, you might say, a murder or killing of our government by law rather than men. I think it actually is a step. It even advances civilization quite a bit, I believe, by this verdict. That's my theory.
How does it advance civilization?
Well, not guilty, I think, would have put it back toward barbarianism or lynch law of each individual citizen deciding who should be killed or who shouldn't be killed.
Mr. Wade, were you surprised at the rather quick decision by the jury?
Well, last night I wasn't satisfied with my argument to the jury at all, and felt awful low about it last night. When the verdict came in within a little over 2 hours, I thought we had either life or death. I didn't know which.
Mr. Wade, Mr. Belli referred to this as railroading and the biggest disgrace in the history of American law.
I think that's his fugue state he's talking about, the way I saw him yelling and screaming up there. I believe it's the first time he ever lost a case, from the way he talked.
Do you feel some sense of satisfaction of having won this case?
Well, I guess anybody that wins any case, you go ask a jury to return a certain verdict and they return it. I'm very well satisfied with it and think it was the proper verdict.
What does this jury verdict coming so quickly signify?
I don't think it actually signifies anything. See, we've had death penalties in 7 minutes here in Dallas. This was over 2 hours. I think it signified that the jury, by the evidence, that had pretty well made up their mind whether that he wasn't insane, that he was sane, and had pretty well thought about this during the night, and didn't take them long to deliberate to arrive at the verdict.
Mr. Wade, prior to the verdict, you had said numerous times that you expected anything from acquittal to death in the electric chair. Did you really feel this way, sir, or was that just a statement for the press?
Well, I didn't think the acquittal or a term of years was the proper verdict in the thing, but I've tried a lot of cases, and I know juries can do nearly anything. I think we got to the jury in a lot better shape on the facts than we were really entitled to. They pitched their whole case on insanity and made a weak case on it, and rather than asking for mercy or leniency. And so the jury probably subconsciously got the idea it's either insanity or death.
Were there any major surprises for you?
Mr. Wade, how would you have defended Jack Ruby?
Well, I don't defend any here, but I think I would have tried to go for leniency rather than all out on insanity.
Were there any major surprises?
All along, sir, that the judge ruled for the prosecution all the way down the line. Could we get your reaction to that, sir?
Of course, if he ruled for us when he shouldn't, the higher courts will reverse the case and send it back. All that'll be on appeal.
This is the 25th murder case you have won, isn't it, Mr. Wade?
Yes, about that many, I believe. 24, 25.
Which was the hardest?
Well, I know this was I know I was the tiredest in this one last night. I was utterly fatigued to the extreme last night.
Mr. Wade, you say you were tired. The jurors were obviously tired. The defendant was. Do you think that this move along attitude of the case had any effect whatsoever on the verdict, or at least on how fast it came out, sir?
Well, I think the jury, as they hear each witness, they make up their mind or start forming a frame of mind of whether they think he's guilty and what they're going to do with him. And I think they've been up there 4 weeks now, some of them have, and the testimony's been going on now 10 days, I believe. And I think the length of the trial makes the verdict a little easier for the jury, quicker for the jury to arrive at.
Mr. Wade, this trial had more press coverage perhaps than any other in history. Did this put you under a particular strain in trying the case?
No, not that I know of. We've had press coverage on others, not to this extent here, but we're used to having the press around.
Mr. Wade, what do you, in retrospect, consider the best item of evidence or testimony that you had in the trial, sir?
Well, by far, the testimony that gave him the electric chair was the officer's testimony, showing premeditation, that he decided to kill the man, or talked about or thought about killing him 2 days before, then took a gun, loaded gun, into the police station and assassinated him as it was seen on television. And then the statements he made thereafter with reference to, I hope I killed the SOB, and I meant to shoot him 3 times, but y'all stopped me. Things of that kind is the type of thing that would give people a death penalty.
Mr. Wade, what do you plan to do now? Go right to work again on Monday, or do you plan a vacation?
Well, I'm going to try to catch up. See, I have I'm behind in all of my work in my office. As a matter of fact, I have over a week's dictation of answering some letters, not on this case, but on other matters from the regular routine of the office.
Mr. Wade, do you regard the outcome of this trial as vindication of Dallas?
I don't think Dallas, I don't think that was, Mr. Belli wanted that to be the thing. I don't think Dallas was on trial. I don't think I was on trial. I don't think Belli was on trial. I think Jack Ruby was on trial. I think it was a murder case that had more implications probably than the ordinary killing, because of the fact you're killing a man handcuffed that's innocent until he's proven guilty. And I think that's what made this a different case from the ordinary murder case.
Mr. Wade, was this an expensive case, or perhaps the most expensive case that you have worked on as far as the county of Dallas is concerned?
I don't know what it cost. From our point of view, I think all of our doctors and all the travel in the case was something around $3,500. Many of our doctors were willing to come at their own expense. I think we're going to pay them a minimum fee of $100 a day while they were here.
How is it that you were able to secure the services of some rather noted people who previously had not been expected to appear?
We just checked and found out who the outstanding authorities in the field of neurology and encephalograph and psychiatry, and brought them in here. We brought in 2 other top psychiatrists out of New York and asked Ruby to talk to him, and he wouldn't talk to him on advice of his lawyer, and we didn't get to use them. They were willing to testify, but they didn't talk to him but 5 minutes.
Mr. Wade, did you add any of these doctors after seeing some of the defense testimony? Did you add doctors at the last minute?
No, we took this encephalogram around to all these doctors a month ago and let them examine it. Dr. Swab and Dr. Forrester and Dr. McKay and Dr. Walker and Dr. Calloway, they've all seen this about a month
Repeating
ago.
that verdict, Jack Ruby has been found guilty of murder with malice and has been sentenced to death.
Pay any attention to the psychiatric testimony.
Henry Wade outside the Dallas County Courthouse now talking with reporters.
On this point,
I think the jury listened to all of it. I think I've tried a number of cases where they had psychiatry as a defense, and I will say that I thought they put up as weakest psychiatric defense if I've ever seen.
Do you consider this one of your greatest legal victories?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a victory for me. It's a victory for all law enforcement, I think. My old staff worked on it.
How many on your staff worked on it, sir?
I had about 10 or 12 that worked on it.
I said it was a victory for the Dallas oligarchy. What do you say about that?
Well, of course, that's a figment of his imagination, the oligarchy here. They, like any town, they have some leaders here that try to help out on civic matters, but politically and otherwise, independents and everybody else are elected here.
Mr. Wade, if you would look back over the entire last 3 months or so, all of the events, and the long testimony of this trial, what would you describe as the legal significance of this verdict?
Well, I think it's a little hard to say. I've been very happy that I've received letters and from defense attorneys all over the country. Ordinarily, they're on the side of the defendant, giving advice on what ought to be done and arguments because they said we think the rule of law is actually on trial in that case. I'm inclined to think it was to some extent. I may exaggerate it. Because in any murder case, if the deceased is a person of bad character or some reason maybe that he ought to have been disposed of, it's hard to get a verdict. But I think the jury recognized that this was more than just killing a person, that if he was the assassin, if he had killed Kennedy, should have had the electric chair. I'm talking about Oswald. I think that this went deeper than that because you had a man that took the law into his own hands and killed a handcuffed man that was innocent until he is proven guilty.
Mr. Wade, as far as you personally are concerned, does the sentence just passed here close the events that began on November 22nd as far as you are concerned?
Well, it'll close it. We have to now start on the next 2 or 3 years. This thing will be in the appellate courts. See, this will be appealed. The law, Texas law requires the Court of Criminal Appeals to hear any death penalty. It'll first go there, and we hope we'll have to do lots of briefing on it. We'll have to argue it there. Then it can go to the United States Supreme Court, which we'll have to be ready to argue it there. And I think it'll be in the appellate courts for 2 years anyhow, and I have specialists in that'll do most of that work.
Mr. Wade, something that had been bothering a lot of people was the question of whether or not there was any link whatsoever between Jack Ruby and Lee Oswald. This wasn't clarified in court. Could you clarify it for us?
Well, it's one of those things that you can't prove. As a matter of fact, if we had anybody that we thought could establish it, we'd put them on the stand. I will say we had 10 or 12 witnesses that were willing to testify that they had seen them together, but I didn't believe any of the witnesses. Some of them were given lie detectors and showed they weren't telling the truth. And there's nothing, we had nothing where we could legally prove that he was.
As far as you are concerned, then, from your investigation, Ruby was acting alone and Oswald was acting alone.
That's the theory we tried the case on entirely. We had no, whether there was a connection or not, we don't know. We have no proof of it, and we assume that there was not.
Mr. Wade, you have testified before the Warren Commission.
Well, I don't know. I asked for it and was satisfied with it.
You have already testified once before the Warren Commission. Do you feel that the verdict in today's case, or the trial, in fact, would lead them to recall you? Do you have any further information to pass along to them?
Well, they've been holding up some matters, I think, dealing with Ruby till after this trial was over that they may go into now. I don't know. If they are, we will help them any way we can.
How much help was the FBI to you in preparing this case?
Well, the way they helped was in interviewing all witnesses that knew anything about him, and we were able to go over some of their statements and get what they told the FBI.
Can you give us an indication, sir, just what the disposition of the defendant will be now, where he will...
He will remain in... he will remain in the county jail until all of his appeals are over, at which time he will be taken to Huntsville, and at that time they will have a hearing before Governor Connolly as to whether or not to commute his sentence to life.
And he could
Jack Ruby has been sentenced to death in the electric chair in Dallas after a jury deliberation of 2 hours and 25 minutes. This is District Attorney Henry Wade, Chief Prosecutor, on the steps of the Dallas County Courthouse now.
We've had cases reversed, but I don't believe there's been a death penalty. None that I recall now.
Mr. Wade, during the...
I think my office has had one that I recall that I didn't try. Someone else tried, and it was reversed.
You have never had a death penalty reversed yourself?
I wouldn't say that. I don't really remember of any, but we've had plenty of cases reversed.
Mr. Wade, during the testimony, the pre-expert testimony, the subject of the convulsive finger on the pistol came up so many times. How significant do you feel that was or wasn't?
I don't think it had one thing to do with it. As a matter of fact, don't think the encephalogram had anything to do with it. I think all that testimony was window dressing.
The Jack Ruby trial offered its extremely rare moments. It was the first trial where the murder in question was caught on camera. It was the first trial where that footage was shown in court. And while this may not be a first, it certainly is not normal, the presiding judge, Joe B. Brown, speaking on the record to reporters immediately after.
I think the networks fell down on me this morning. There was an agreement there'd be no cameras in that courtroom, except the one television camera. When I went in after I went and took the verdict and walked out and came back in, there were all networks in there. Everybody was in there with a camera. I don't like that. I think if we make an agreement, and I made an agreement with you all, you should have kept it.
How do you feel that the agreement that was made with the networks was broken, sir?
Well, they were all in there when I went back in there, Murphy.
But, sir, that was after the court had been adjourned.
The court was adjourned then with the networks.
And it was agreed that there'd be no live televisions in the courtroom at any time.
Judge, Mr. Belli said that you were aware that a juror had made a statement that he would give Jack Ruby the death penalty even before he was selected.
No, sir. No, sir, I was not.
Had either Mr. Belli or the reporter told you anything about that?
The reporter told me something about it last week. But,
Judge Brown, you plan to rest for
a while
now?
I didn't know about it, yes. Overall, Nelson, I don't mean to complain. I'm not a griper. I've been in public office too long. And I guess perhaps I shouldn't criticize you all for what you did. Because overall, you did a wonderful job, and I appreciate it a very great deal. And perhaps your zeal got away this morning. I don't know. I wasn't here. They woke me up when the verdict came in, or when the jury was ready. And I got up, showered, and came on down here, and everything went off fine. Except, you remember the agreement was we would cut the television off as soon as I left the bench. The network live television, and it wasn't cut off. Somebody called me on the telephone and told me they were still televising the courtroom scene. Then I went back and asked the operator, is that what you call him? The engineer or whatever he is that operates the machine to cut it off, and he did.
May we get you to, sir, discuss the verdict just a little bit?
No, sir, I wouldn't discuss the verdict at all.
Can you tell us where the case may go from here, sir?
Well, the only place it can go is the Court of Criminal Appeals.
Have you heard any motions for appeal yet,
no,
sir?
No, sir, I have not.
Judge Brown, when will you hear those, Judge Brown?
Well, sometime within 40 days.
And when will you sentence the defendants?
Oh, I won't sentence him until the appeals have all been exhausted and he...
Were you surprised at the quick call this morning? Less than 2.5 hours of deliberation. Aren't you surprised at anything anymore?
I'm not surprised at anything a jury will do.
Judge Brown, there were 139 different objections raised by the defense counsel, were there not? Did you accede to any of these at all?
Yes, sir. Some of them were good.
How many did you grant?
Oh, I don't know. I think perhaps 4 or 5 out of the 139.
Judge, Mr. Belli has been making quite a point of this information which a reporter told you that one juror had made a statement. Do you feel that that's a reversible error or anything like that?
I don't know. I don't know anything about it. Mr. Belli credits me with some things that I haven't heard yet.
He contends, sir, that you constantly rude.
You want my pipe?
Look out, you back again. Mr. Belli contends, Judge Brown, that you constantly rude.
Which one, Wes?
With the wrapper on.
The other one.
This one? Yeah. Let my West have you, Mike, will you?
Judge Brown, Mr. Belli contended after the trial that you constantly ruled for the prosecution. I'm sure you have something to say on this.
I really have nothing to say, actually. You know what a struggle it is in the courtroom. Mr. Belli did his utmost to represent his client. So did Mr. Tonnehill. And I have no complaint of Mr. Belli and Mr. Tonnehill. I think they're both fine lawyers. And I think Mr. Belli is one of the most brilliant attorneys that's ever appeared in my court. And I was glad to have him. And I think a great deal of him as a lawyer and as a man. And I have no complaint against Mr. Belli. I think he's probably in the throes of an emotional state now himself. And I think he's a fine man. And he's welcome back any time in my courtroom he wants to try a case.
Do you think that all in all this was a fair and impartial trial?
I wouldn't make any comment about that. The court upstairs will decide that. If there's something done wrong, then the appellate court will rectify it. You may depend upon that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I've tried it to the best of my ability.
Judge Joe B. Brown,
Judge Brown, have you ever seen a demonstration
outside the
like
courtroom,
yes, sir,
where Jack Ruby has just been sentenced to death in the electric chair for the murder of Lee Harvey Oswald.
Not with that many TV cameras and so forth.
No, I've never seen a case covered from a news media standpoint that this case has had.
Was that your voice saying get the cameras out of the court?
It could have been, Mr. Wise.
Judge?
I asked somebody to remove the cameras. I think I asked the sheriff's office to remove the cameras from the courtroom.
Judge, they were yelling inside about some juror who was alleged to have said something about he was going to...
I don't know. Mr. Belli made mention of that, and I'm not... I heard a week or 10 days ago that one of the jurors made some statement, but I don't know when or where, under what circumstances. I know, I'm sure... No, I didn't do anything about it. Just hearsay with me.
If it had been proved, Judge, would that have been a reason for a mistrial?
I doubt it, seriously. I don't know. I don't know any of the facts and circumstances surrounding it at all. The statement might have been made, might not have been made. You know how things start. Rumors, all sorts of rumors go around. As you newspapermen well ought to know. But Mr. Belli, of course, has a right to his opinion. And I wouldn't say anything here that to try to justify my own.
Thank you very much.
Because I did the best I knew how, and I called them like a song. And that's all any judge can do.
Tell us, sir, why you changed your mind about the live radio coverage, or that is the live radio broadcasting of your charge and the arguments to the jury last night. Were you under some pressure from the so-called oligarchy or anybody else?
No, sir, I have not. The so-called oligarchy did not call me, nor did any member of the Citizens Council, nor any member of any bar association. I did it on my own, and I will accept the responsibility for it.
By this time now, lead defense attorney Melvin Belli has calmed down a bit, but he certainly isn't done talking. More now from Belli, who is planning to appeal.
Then you've got a pretty good idea that it's guilty and that they know damn well that it's not deserved.
What did he say after? And you didn't get any reaction from reaction after the verdict?
No, I didn't want any reaction because I was trying to keep him calm down there.
What's the exact next step? What's the first thing you do now?
We'll go to an appeal.
Mr. Bella, what's the first thing he told you when you saw him in jail?
Are these Christian gentlemen still with us here?
Yeah, they are professionals. Put your trust in Jesus instead of a psychiatrist. Hey, you move out and we're working now, okay? What did he say about when you get to the cell right away?
Well, as soon as we went up to see him, we saw him right afterwards, and he came in. He was very calm. And the first thing he said was how nice the people up there had been to him. And the second thing, he said how many other people must have been railroaded out of Dallas. And then he started to say that he hadn't said these things after his arrest, and those had bothered him all night, but these policemen that he thought were friends of his coming in and lying. Why would they want to lie about him?
Is Rabbi Silverman coming to see him later in the day?
Oh, yes, I'm sure he will. Unless, now, wait a minute, the rabbi, I think, went away today.
Today's Saturday.
I think he was going away today, but I'm sure that he'll come in to see him just as soon as he can, or send someone else to see him.
Is he being allowed to see his sisters?
Yes, he'll see the sisters today, and he'll see the members of the family, too.
You didn't cry at all? You didn't see any
I haven't
cry?
seen the sisters because we just went up there and came down.
He didn't cry at all?
No, he
Never,
didn't.
no
He
time.
did. I think that
When
we were
present the appeal
messier than he.
When are you going to present your appeal?
Just as fast as we can.
How long is it likely to be?
I think within 6 months we'll have an opinion at the outset.
And what happens in
Where
the
the
meantime?
first
Does he
appeal?
stay in the county jail here?
Yes, he stays here. They may move him to some different quarters in there, but he will stay in the county jail.
You won't apply. You won't reapply. Can you reapply for a bond while he's?
No.
When did the first appeal you have? To the Texas court? Or
The Texas Criminal Court of Appeals. They have a specialized court of criminal appeals in Texas, which is unique. We go there first, and then we have an opportunity to go into the Texas Supreme Court, and from there we go into the United States Supreme Court if we have to, but I'm sure we won't have to.
What do you feel about the television camera in the courtroom?
Jack didn't say anything.
Now, didn't you say you didn't think he realized the verdict a minute ago? Wasn't aware of it?
Well, I think if a normal person had just had the death sentence passed on him, he might react differently than Jack, and then on the other hand, he might be numb. I've sat with other defendants who have had the death penalty, and there have been different reactions.
Before the verdict was announced, you had an idea of what it was going to be, that it was
The
going
way
to be
that
guilty.
the jury looks at you,
Right.
if you've seen enough of them,
What
you
did
can
you
tell
expect?
whether
What
it's...
sort of a sentence? Any idea?
Well, I thought that it would be a suspended sentence or 5 years at the very most.
What did you think of the judge letting the
But
television
that's what I was trying to think, or rather I should answer that's what I was hoping, because I knew from the very beginning of this thing, when we first made our motion and made our sequential motions, that this jury was going to have to put him again into the public abattoir, and I use that word, to cleanse this city of its sins. If ever there were 12 people in need of a psychiatrist, it's those 12 people who sat on that jury and their public relation officer. I have never, from Magna Carta to the present time, seen a spectacle to rival this. You ask about railroad, you ask about kangaroo court, never have I seen anything to rival this.
What do you think
Public relations officers for the court, closing arguments beginning at 12, or starting at 12 midnight. One judge coming on the court and saying that he will consider a motion for change of venue, and then saying he can't because that's for the other judge. And the other judge considering a motion for change of venue and part of the trial that he hasn't heard. The allowing of 2 jurors on. One of them, do you know that one of those jurors actually, her nephew does the TV program for the police department, Know Your Police Department, and she certainly did. She knew the one she waved at when he came as a witness, one of the main witnesses against us.
Did even discuss the Jack Ruby case with him.
I beg pardon?
Will this be part of your appeal case?
Oh, those are minor. Those are minor.
Did you hear about a juror who had mentioned something about death penalty before being
Yes,
picked
that
up?
was
What
McCoy.
is exactly? What did you hear?
Well, that was the Morning News, who was more responsible for the assassination of the president than any one instrument, and more responsible for the festering and the superation in this city than any other instrument, and more responsible for the death verdict of Jack Ruby than any other person or instrument. The reporter from the Morning News went into the judge and told him 10 days ago that McCoy had told his employee if he were to sit on this jury that he would give the electric chair.
McCoy?
Yeah.
He said he told the judge that before we knew it, too.
10 days ago.
Yeah, before we knew it.
That's Hugh Ainsworth.
Now, I don't know why the judge would entertain and the channel at the Morning News would have into his honor's chambers to report something like this. We learned it independently. Why didn't we do something about it? Well, we don't have as much influence with his honor as the Morning News, certainly.
Do you think Ruby will...
What?
Main points of your appeal.
Well, there are 30 of them.
Starting off with the word.
30 of them?
30. 30 at least by last track. The charge that took us all day was so gross. The charge is the one that they used on the colored boy whose jury was picked on Monday. He was sentenced to the chair and in Huntsville by Wednesday.
Same week?
Same 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Mr. Belli, could you go into a bit more detail about what Jack said to you just now and how he looked?
No, he was very calm, very quiet, very relaxed, almost as though the verdict was a cathartic for him.
Did he know what was happening?
How can I say? He's certainly, with a man that has had a death penalty, he certainly wasn't apprehensive or anxious. I hope it's as a result of some of the confidence that we tried to give him and that we feel with reference to a reversal.
What did he actually say? Appeal?
Just what I've been saying here. Number one, that he wanted the people to know how good the jailers had been to him in there, and he mentioned some people specifically. And then secondly, his query as to how many others had been railroaded out of Dallas. And then the third thing was that why would these police officers lie on the stand when he was their friend and he thought they were his friend?
Doesn't that show perception on his part if he's able to...
Beg pardon?
It shows he's rather perceptive, doesn't it?
Well...
You said he was lethargic and then you talked about his being perceptive in this manner.
It was a cathartic verdict.
Did you try to get the psychiatrist to see him now, a doctor, to follow him for the next
we're going to have a doctor follow him directly because by tomorrow you're going to have these things.
When will the date normally be set for execution?
Joe will have to tell you that. I think that he'll come in for formal sentencing now, and then there will be a date set for execution, which will be stayed pending the appeal.
Formal sentencing later today?
No, later next week, won't it, Joe?
We'll file a motion for new trial, which undoubtedly will be summarily and automatically overruled by the trial court. Then we'll give a notice of appeal. File the appeal. He'll be sentenced after the motion.
I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of appearing here personally on the motion for new trial.
Did Jack say or express any surprise at the quickness of the verdict? No, he didn't.
What was that, an hour and 50-minute verdict? Hour and 50 minutes of actual deliberation from the time they elected a foreman, ate breakfast, started
they
deliberation.
They would have returned that verdict last night at, what time did we get out of there? Was it 1:30?
1:05.
1:05? I think they would have returned that verdict there, but and then without leaving the box, but they were a little ashamed, and maybe the oligarchy wouldn't have thought that would have been that might have been too obvious even for Dallas.
The day ending the original trial of the century was an end to a forever tragic few months in Dallas, Texas, a city that would for a few years have to deal with an unfair and without merit nickname, the City of Hate. November 22, 1963 brought the sun out from the morning clouds. It brought a young, enthusiastic president with bold ideas and restraint from overseas threats. Then in the blink of an eye, gunfire stained the city. The people saw their police department come into question on if enough was done to secure the prisoner. Then a nightclub owner with a shady background takes the spotlight and is tried and convicted of murder. Jack Ruby's act prevented legal closure in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. His assassination and the murder of Dallas officer J.D. Tippit never saw a conviction of a suspect, just questions and debate for decades. But the conviction of Ruby finally allowed a brief end to the tragedy that fell upon Dallas, a tragedy that led one television host to offer while on national TV that the eyes of Dallas were held in shame. That end, though, was just the beginning in the never-ending story linking President John F. Kennedy to Dallas, Texas, a city where he came with the simple goal of waving at crowds, impressing voters, and delivering a speech. I'm Eric Bushman.
And I'm Brandon Birmingham. This has been the State of Texas versus Jack Ruby, the original trial of the century. Thank you very much for joining us. Here's the bibliography for this last episode. The transcript of the trial against Jack Ruby is publicly available online from the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, Texas Digital Archive, and the Court of Criminal Appeals Centralized Court Case Files Collection. There were 2 articles used from the Dallas Morning News, originally published on March 15, 1964, both of which were written by staff writers. First one, verdict temporarily ends tense period since November 22nd, and the second one, 3 knocks on doors signal jury ready with verdict. I'd also like to give a special thanks to the 6th Floor Museum at Dealey Plaza. I'd like to give a special thanks to WFAA-TV in Dallas. The audio that you heard of the interviews from the lawyers back in 1964 were donated by them to the 6th Floor Museum at Dealey Plaza. I'd also like to say thank you to Eric Bushman for sharing his talents with me, to the 7 lawyers who gave us the excellent rendition of the closing arguments, and finally to Bob Jackson for letting me use his historic photograph for the podcast.